Adam, we are here in the world famous nerd mecca that is your cave. Thank you so much for having me here. We are here today because we just finished a one-day build of this beautiful object you can see behind us. Of course, if you want to see exactly what we built, what it's for, how it turned out, and the story behind it, you can go to Tested on YouTube and check that video out. Now, wherever that might be popping up here.
There's probably a link in the comments.
I'll put the link in the description. But I wanted to take the opportunity, while we were doing this, I've been feeling very reminiscent, and creating something like this with you specifically feels kind of like, as we said off camera, kind of like a capstone to my Mythbusters experience. I checked the other day, and my first tweet ever in 2009 was like, gonna play some video games and watch Mythbusters later, I don't know. In 2010, I have a very skinny me taking a photo with Jamie Heineman when he visited my engineering school. 2014, first time meeting you, I think, at Comic-Con. 2016, hosting a Mythbusters spin-off show. And our paths have weaved together ever since
it's true.
We've done that. And I've been thinking about the trillions of little things that had to have happened since I was a kid to bring us to this point here. And I kind of wanted to, well, first of all, just say, hey, thanks, man.
My absolute pleasure.
But now that you're also, we were talking about this like 2 years ago, how we were thinking about transitioning into a different kind of phase of creation and making and putting things out into the world. We were kind of in a similar area. Do I start doing something new and different? And I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on where we're at now and how we've transitioned into this new arena.
Yeah, it has been fascinating, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a long time.
You know, I think of each of the different things that we do in the category, you know, you've just been talking about branching out as different modes of storytelling. Right? I realize that's the linking tissue of everything I've ever done, whether it's model making or building stuff here in the cave or making television shows. They're all forms of assembling and telling and disseminating stories.
Yeah.
And yeah, this last couple of years, I've been joking. I didn't expect, to be totally fair, I have thought of Tested for a long time as not a side hustle, but like another thing I did.
Yeah.
And COVID hit, and it became the only thing I did.
Sure.
And there was so much grace in that space and time that the lockdown gave me in here. Time to find what I wanted to do, find new ways to tell stories, but also, look, I really ascribe to Chris Hardwick's axiom that reading your own comments is a form of cutting. And despite that even, I will say that the comments on Tested's videos, by and large, are just a sort of unfettered loveliness. And I got a lot out of that conversation. I got off Twitter early on in COVID. And that was a real net benefit for me.
Sure.
I mean, we still tweet through me on Twitter, but
it's not
I'm not engaged with it on
constant
a daily
interaction.
basis.
Yeah,
I can't take that kind of thing in anymore. But being able to still feel like I am having a conversation in here, telling stories to people who are listening to them, processing them, feeding back to me what they're learning from them, and then I learn new things from that too. It's pretty amazing.
And when you say that, what strikes me is that that has to be completely different than how it was when you started, right? I mean, well, not completely different, but the real-time feedback from something like Twitter is so wildly different than something like making a TV show or doing Mythbusters before any of these things were off the ground.
And for the longest time, I really loved that about Twitter. I loved that it felt like a conversation that I was having, and it gave me access to my fans in a way that was boundaried. I could disengage when I needed to. I could dip in. Of course, what ends up becoming, as we're all learning with social media, is it ends up becoming this feedback loop. And, I realized I was jumping on Twitter to either feel good or feel bad.
Sure.
One of the two.
Yeah.
Get my anger on to feel like I was doing something in the face of all the weirdness that was going on, or like let me stroke my ego, which totally happens.
Sure.
And Twitter was a sea change in that. Again, yeah, you're right. From making a TV show, and you'd make a show, and it'd be 6 months to a year sometimes before the episode aired.
Yeah.
Feedback is a real distant thing. There's a way in which the stuff I've been doing here and the people I follow, like you and This Old Tony and ClickSpring and Stefan Gotzeviner. I mean, I feel like with each of these YouTube channels, I feel like I get to spend time in the minds of the people doing them in a way that's way more than you feel on television. Yeah,
no, that's the lack of boundaries simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating, right? Because you realize you can do anything. Where I don't know what the hell will be up on the channel right now as we're speaking, but it'll go from talking about a video game or whatever to speaking with you, or something like that, where you can kind of ping pong within this narrow niche that you're carving out and seeing where the reflection is best.
Well, let me ask you: do you do this too? Because I'll do something where I'll be in a groove for a month and be doing similar kinds of videos for a month, and then something will shift. Like I just did this big job for G4. It soaked up like 2 months of my time.
Yeah.
And then I come back to here and I'm like, what do I do again?
Yeah.
How do I do this? Oh, right. Q&As, tool tips. Right. Okay. And one day around shopping for structure. Okay. And like it felt like I had to get back into the zone of what it was to make videos here.
Yeah. No, once we tried a format that was like this little documentary series about nuclear disasters and stuff. And once that was shown to be successful and people liked it, it was kind of also a moment where I had to ask myself, well, should I just record VO and write like essays and just record that and never be on screen again? Because economically, it would be probably better.
Right.
But then you have to make a decision about what you're putting forth, and maybe there's some benefit to doing some of those hard things or complicated things that has knock-on effects that make you. Right.
Well, and I think you're getting to something really essential there, because to me, I do, like you, a lot of thinking about the bigger picture, and I keep redounding to what always works is when I come in here in the morning and figure out what I want to do. Mm-hmm. I had a teacher, a hustler, used to teach me how to play billiards back in my early 20s. So we got together every week for about a year, and at one point, towards the end of our tenure, he said, look, all you want to know when you lean over the table is, where is my cue ball going to end up? Where are the various object balls going to end up? If you can answer those two questions, every single time you lean into the crouch, and just that simplicity of that basic approach. And so, I keep redounding to, I think about bigger stories I want to tell and ways in which I'd like to tell them and formats in which I'd like to tell them. And I do pursue those, but I also remember that it all Mythbusters stems from me in the workshop. This stems from me in the workshop. It was like following those things of interest and passions is where it all grows up from. And frequently, I'm sure you are completely surprised by how stuff lands.
Yes. It's like, wow, I did not meet. I spent so much less time on that. What I think though, and I've been thinking about this more and more. The more I work, and again, you knowingly or not knowingly, ushered me into this kind of gig. Is that when you say things are successful and you just like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to lean into this weird idea that I have, I'm going to have faith in it. I feel like it really comes from a place where you have to trust yourself and you have to know that you're good, or know that you will make your way through it. And something that
that's true.
Those are very different things.
That's true.
I mean, you trust enough in your own abilities that if you try something, it's not going to totally explode in your face.
You're not overthinking it.
Yeah. So one thing that I think even Mythbusters gets at specifically, and everything you're doing in the shop too, is that you can set your mind to something as long as you're trusting in your abilities and following, what you have to follow. You have the faith in yourself that you can get there.
Well, that's also that thing that it's inherently interesting. It is inherently interesting watching someone do something that they're interested in. When you do an explanatory piece about science, I feel like I'm not just witnessing you talking at me, I'm hearing your discovery of this too.
Yeah.
And I'm getting, I know that when you research something you don't know about until you understand it, you get an endorphin rush at that moment in which you do. When the moment you have a point of view, right?
Yeah.
It all cascades down. And I just got goosebumps describing that, because I chase that high.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, it's almost, you have like the perfect analogy or whatever, and it's like,
You'll wake up in the middle of the night being like, I know how to say this. I know how to
No,
frame
exactly.
this.
And Carl Sagan, he's like, when you love something, you want to tell the world about it, right? And I feel like that's been instilled in me, especially by your performances. And I point this out to people frequently, is that when someone is really good at standing up in front of a camera and delivering information, it looks effortless. But what you kind of engendered in me is to hit the beats that you need to hit, but you're incorporating all these other things that are unsaid. It's like 99% invisible or what have you, where you have to be energetic. You know that inserting a joke or whatever, or being self-deprecating helps sometime for understanding. If you say a big word, you have to follow it by some other smaller words and then bring them back to the big word. There's an entire skill set there that unless you're looking for it, you don't see it. And when I was a kid, or a teenager going through college, I started looking for it.
Interesting.
And what I can tell, for example, like your delivery from someone like a Neil's delivery or Bill's or Alton Brown or anything like that, where I even haven't, you've probably seen me do my impression of you, but, there's a difference, there's a difference. You know what, there's an old story where I was speaking, actually I'll get some plywood out here. So the thing about plywood is that if you look at the grains, now look at them closely, that there's a difference between that and something like an Alton Brown. Where it's like, now a lot of people can tell you that if you just use plywood, it's fine, but for my money, I don't really need that.
There's also a fundamental difference in the priority there. Alton is an amazing writer, and he pre-writes his pieces.
He's so good at it.
He actually, I understand.
When the first episode of Good Eats that I saw, I'd never seen him before, he does like a 4-minute PTC with no breaks plus like props he's doing. I was like, holy shit.
No, I know.
That is so hard.
I do know some inside baseball about how he does that. He wears an earpiece and plays the piece in, and he's just a half step behind the play.
Okay, see, I was gonna be like, that's kind of cheating, but then if it's that's
it's not as hard to do as you think it is. But what's beautiful about it is Alton gets to crap.
Maybe that's why he says so much.
He started out as a DP.
Yeah.
Then he went to culinary school. This is a man obsessed with precision, right? And I love Alton for that.
Yeah.
And he's a beautiful writer.
Yeah.
And so I am not a terrific writer. I am a different kind of performer. So again,
but I know you are
strengths.
masterful at. If I could probably throw anything into your hand right now, and you could do a piece to camera about it.
Well, that's because I'm always. Let me ask you a question. When you are speaking to camera,
I'm just building you up a little bit.
Who are you thinking that you're talking to?
It's never a crowd.
Right.
It's never a crowd.
So who is it?
It's a weird question.
Because I have someone very specific.
You have someone specific.
Yeah. Kurt Vonnegut said that he was told at one point that every writer had an audience they were writing for, and Vonnegut realized, I'm writing everything for my sister.
Weird.
And she just was in his head and in his psyche in a specific way.
Interesting.
She was his audience. My audience, when I'm doing a piece to camera, is my wife, my partner.
Really?
It's specifically because, like, you could imagine, my wife has spent 20 years with a man who comes home every day with the weirdest tales of what they did. And that gets old.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we have a house, we're going to make dinner. We don't have to have an amazing story all the time. But if it's something that really moved me, if something happened that was important and abiding, she totally does want to hear that because she's my partner and she loves me. And so when I'm looking down the barrel of the camera, I am thinking about the respect I have for her as an audience in maintaining a truthfulness about my experience that is a sign of respect. I'm like,
that's a very
can't tell
different
shaggy dog jokes because I can't waste people's time like that. I hate sitting through one knowing I'm going to hear 5 minutes of crap before I hear a punchline. And that's just me. I don't mind I really don't mind a good shaggy dog story, but I won't tell them because that's just not the kind of it's not the kind of way I want to take up people's attention.
I've never actually thought about the answer to that question because I think if I had to answer gun to my head, it's no one specific. It's like this idea of an audience. Do you know what I mean? It's not people, and it's more like, you know, it almost feels like I'm talking to myself a little bit. It's like how I would want to be heard or something like that. It's a weird.
The reason I'm bringing it up and asking you to think about
that sounds beneficial.
Well, it's because you talk about doing a piece to camera as a skill, and I think of it more as a frame of mind. I recognize that it is a skill that I have built over the years. But for me to get ready to be on camera is about literally just like put my body in the right frame.
Sure.
And then it is easy.
Yes.
I walked into a location recently where someone had a camera running, so I walked in the front door of this office I hadn't been in and someone was already filming and I had to stop it because it's like, I'm totally comfortable being on camera, but I have to.
I gotta shift that gear up.
Yeah. And I'm sure you've felt the same thing, right? There's a frame for being there and pushing out and doing that stuff, but it takes time and energy, and so I it's very specifically a frame of mind of engagement to a specific audience for me.
Your persona to the audience is tied to that kind of speaking and what stories you tell and all that kind of thing, and it's going to give people a very different impression of you or not.
Well, it's going to give the impression, I mean, like, I view that what I'm doing is just telling them, I'm trying just to tell the truth, right, about my experience. So I view it as axiomatic that people being honest about their experience, not even being thrilled with their experience, but people being honest about their experience are inherently fascinating to watch.
And what I always think is so unique about your experience and is interesting to me as someone in the space is that you were in this very unique pressure cooker of a situation in early science media, so to speak, where if you wanted a good builder, they're building. If you wanted a good science communicator, they're doing that. To do both and to have someone who can make stuff while also being entertaining was something that wasn't forced upon you, but you became good at it because you had to be.
Well, no, actually, I'm not sure that's. Sorry, I think you're.
Please.
It just happened to be that when they were casting Mythbusters, they were looking for someone who had a shop because they couldn't afford to build a shop from scratch because they were shooting pilots. They found Jamie. Jamie called me, and we turned out in that first set of pilots to be two people for totally different reasons who could be ourselves on camera, no matter what we were doing. And like that, Jamie doesn't care that the camera's on, and that's what makes him thrilling to watch because you're seeing a real person, one of God's own prototypes, move around. And it wasn't that I had to get good at being on camera. I mean, it was this whole process of, first of all, my first few cameramen from Paul Henry and Peter Heap and Heapy, the smiling assassin, Peter Coleman. I mean, I was really graced, Benny Scott. I was really graced with some amazing people And that relationship is super important.
Oh, yeah.
For television, that relationship is everything.
You know what they can get out of you, what you can get out of them.
So understand that, like, when we started making the show, you're describing it as if we're like, okay, now we're doing a show, we got to learn this thing. It was more like we shot pilots. No, we sent in a demo reel that showed up 3 weeks later. And we shot for 6 weeks, and then they disappeared for 6 months. And then the show went up, and the season got awarded like a week later, and then we didn't stop filming for 13 years. So it was
that sounds terrifying.
An absolute trial by fire.
Yeah.
Well,
that's what I mean.
Way.
In the crucible of this
Yeah.
emerged the style and the substance and the impact.
I mean, and that's a collaboration. That's a collaboration between me and Jamie and Carrie, Grant, and Tori, and those crews.
Of course.
All of our producers from from Beyond Productions on down. I mean, I'm so grateful. Yeah, when I think on this, right, and so I'm like picturing the crew, and I'm picturing any given morning with a cup of coffee, wondering where we're going to do our opening shot of this sequence, and it's just like, it was such a loving experience for the most part, and there was some hitches here and there, but
sure,
like over 13 years, it's mostly amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, I obviously can't super relate, but working with some of them.
You worked with most of the same. You worked with. You chewed on a lot of the same dirt.
What I noticed immediately was for a small crew, and if you don't, I mean, that might not mean much to you, but it wasn't 30 people.
It was like 7.
It was like 7.
Yeah.
For everyone to be so good at their jobs and to be so knowledgeable of each other and what each other. How to talk to each other and how to get this shot, where I should be and move around. Everyone was so skilled and so nice.
Yeah.
It was really lucky. It's just weird to say, to someone, it's like, hey, you've had a singular a singular impact on my life and on so many people's lives, and it's a hard question to expect you to answer coherently, but I do want to know, since I'm here, and since we have something like this, which is kind of like a capstone project for my engineering.
So happy you have that.
In that part of my life feels like, I was saying this to Kristen, I don't think, what else could I do Mythbusters wise that I would want to do or need to do? I feel like I've been a part of the world and worked with it and worked with you and woven my story in part of this tapestry. And I really do wonder, how do you view that kind of impact or potential impact you have on people? Because, let me just frame it without being too gushy. When I hold a couple of experiences in my head, you're one of them, in that it's kind of crystallized what I want to do with my life, big picture wise, as we were saying. And one time it was Bill Nye on stage. I hosted a Q&A with him or whatever. He said, someone's like, oh, what do you think about Legacy? He's like, Kyle, I'm passing you the torch, man. Don't fuck it up.
That's great.
And then it was you on stage at New York Comic Con. It's like, hey, it's Kyle. He's one of the next guys. My body can't handle this anymore. He's going to have to do it.
Yeah.
And what I realized, and what I tell people now, is that it doesn't really matter to me what specifically I'm doing. I just want to have an impact.
Okay. I am going to give you a tack on that you might not expect. Because I'm the child of an artist. I'm an artist. And from that perspective, when I am making something, I'm trying to think of having an example. Give me just a sec. This is, one could call this a prop replica, but really to me it's a piece of art, right? This is an aesthetic experience that I let take over my life for a period of time. I went to a lot of places I didn't know about. It took a lot out of me, and it gave me a lot, right? That's what an aesthetic experience to me is all about. I was not skilled enough to complete this when I started, and I figured out how to complete it while I built it.
Yeah.
Now, as an aesthetic experience, this thing is really important to me because I feel like this object is perfect. And that is for me. And that is what I was seeking. And so I'm very grateful to have had the experience to build this. The question about what it does to other people out in the world, I can't have any control over that. I try to keep redounding to the personal aesthetic experience, knowing that if the product of my output does land with other people, that's a bonus, but it's not the point.
Interesting.
Because, it started out like you got me through high school chemistry, and then it was like you got me through college. Oh, now I'm a PhD, and I run into PhDs all the time. I got started watching Mythbusters. And the joke I tell that now is finally getting a laugh is just know that one day I will call upon my army.
I need you for this.
When you say, I want to have an impact, that is also a valid and totally reasonable thing to want. Because I was just talking to this wonderful young maker, Jorvan, who was saying, look, I just want to make YouTube videos so that people who look like me will see that what they want to do is possible.
Sure.
And that is a beautiful goal to have in life. So it's not true that I don't want to have an impact. I shouldn't give that impression. I do want to have an impact, but the impact I want to have is I'd like anyone to obtain and be able to access the pleasure I get following my nose through these projects. Like you and I were talking off camera about researching. One of the things we both do all the time is we encounter a tranche of material we don't know anything about. And we read into it, and at a certain point, some mailbox thing goes, hey, you've got a point of view on this, and then we've got a little bit of a handle, and we build that into a bigger handle, and all of a sudden we've got a full piece to camera. And I get chills every time I describe that experience because that is one of the greatest highs I know of. And getting to follow that, like for me, learning about the world and physics and being able to apply a scientific mindset in order to parse the world is a deeply important and pleasurable experience. And I want everyone to have that and be able to trust themselves aesthetically, engineering-wise, and be able to see things for the way they are.
Sure.
So that is totally an impact I want to have. But I view that the only way I can have that impact is not by trying to have it.
Yes.
It is by just really dialing into the simplicity of my experience and the honesty of what is happening with it. You started today talking about 10-year-old you being really amazed that you're here doing this. And I spent a lot of time thinking about the fact that our lives look really linear from any given vantage point, but that in the middle of them, it's mostly triage. Right? You are making some conscious decisions about the contracts you do and don't sign, sure. But for the most part, a lot of it is down to like, how did you feel that evening? And where was this person when you were thinking about that?
I mean, there's a happenstantial through line that led me into this chair from Dan Tapster reading an article that I wrote at Scientific American in 2013. And he was like, This kid seems good. And emailing me out of the blue.
Amazing.
Just happened to be in Los Angeles at that time. Just
and you
all
were
of these things.
Right. The confluence of those things are impossible to surmise some lesson from. That's all that I always want to impart when
I think that's what I'm struggling with. I like the idea that instead of our meeting and our being involved with each other, being some inscrutable mystery of the universe, in fact, being the kind of people that we are, having the kinds of sense and objectives and maybe even talents that we have, doesn't it make sense that we possibly would end up in similar spaces?
Oh, sure. But I'm also sure that there are hundreds of people we would be dying to hang out with, moving all over the world right now that we have no idea about, and we're only going to meet a fraction of them.
No, just you, buddy.
This is my favorite conversation. I think about this stuff all the time. I really do. And like I said, it has been fascinating, the landscape of storytelling for me over the past couple of years, because it really has shifted fundamentally what I think is possible, and that's really exciting.
Sure. When you see people like me coming up into the next wave of this kind of thing that we're doing, I mean, how does it strike you? Is it?
Oh, I get really excited. I love the stylistic differences of all the YouTube videos I go and watch.
And also very cognizant decision, for example, there's a lot of skinny white guys talking about science on YouTube.
Yeah, this is totally true.
Big reason why I don't cut my hair. No, honestly. Even my agents are like, don't cut your hair. It's distinguishing. It's that St. Vincent edifice. It's that works. You don't look like Joe Hansen or Derek or I mean, I do kind of look like the physics girl from behind, but these are decisions to make yourself distinctive in a crowded environment that was not the case with something like traditional media. Where
you can't.
Well, there wasn't literally 1,000 different science shows.
Right, but again, okay, wait. Now here's where I view that, like, trying to think about how you place in the cosmology is folly.
Oh,
I really do.
I think it's. I
think if you woke up tomorrow morning and it was really important to you to cut your hair, you should cut your hair. And not consider, because like there's a moment in your life where that decision will surprise you.
Yes. No, I
mean, all I'm saying.
Well, you think I like this?
I do.
This is a monetary decision. but that's what I think.
I called Kyle right after the Ragnarok came out, and I was like, "You gonna cut your hair?" Everyone called you, didn't they?
You got to do this. You got to do this now. Well, but that's what I think might be different now. Is like when I was talking about the monetization of your entire life. These kids who want to be famous fast and make a lot of money quick by making your entire life a product.
Yeah.
Thinking about where I place in the cosmology of things, as you put it, is something I can tell you is something that me and all of my colleagues that I know personally.
Yeah.
It's what they do constantly.
Yeah. I view that as so. I recognize
down to titles and thumbnails.
Yeah,
man.
No, it's totally.
What did Derek do? What did Kyle do? What did Destin do?
Oh, that's different. Sorry, I make a distinction between paying attention and being obsessed with how everyone else is doing their thing, and thinking about how I place within that cosmology. Those are two different thought processes.
Yeah.
So I totally.
Well, you want to also move within it.
I view thinking of that.
We do. That's what I'm trying to impart, though.
I feel like I
have conversations
that's interrupting some important creative processes.
But now you have this overarching artificial machine that will show your art and what you want to do, or not, based on
the algorithm.
Are you playing the game or not?
The algorithm, yeah.
And I agree with you in that I think that is diluting a lot of creativity and listening to your own voice, because there is a way thumbnails have to be, for example, or a way.
And boy, you screw up a thumbnail, and boy, do you know about it.
That's it,
right?
It's done.
You're dead.
May as well not have done that video.
Yeah,
it's gone.
So true.
No, and it's
but
this
again,
weird.
That's different than thinking about. I respectfully disagree with you that's a new thing.
I respectfully say, with all due respect, that also someone in your position does not have to worry about this.
Absolutely true. You're absolutely right. I have a luxury of having gotten famous a while ago, and there's a momentum to that. You're totally right. And I don't have an answer to that. It's completely valid. However,
to your credit, you're not fucking coasting. You're putting out like 2 videos a day. It is wild.
Well, I mean, that's also because I'm having so much fun, and people ask about my productivity, and I point out I don't do anything in the evenings. Like I go home and we just hang quietly.
That is essential to my. I would have killed myself.
Yeah.
Like 6 o'clock happens, phone is like.
Yeah. Every time someone comes to stay with us for a while, they're like, "Wow, you guys are quiet."
Yeah. I know.
So I
can't.
I want to go back to this about the paying attention. Like, you can never view yourself objectively, ever. And so it is like
Technically, no.
look. I
But
think
you
that
can view
whenever we
yourself
look-
as a consumer.
Here I'm going to say this: whenever we look in a mirror, we are not looking at a reflection of ourselves. We are looking at a reflection of our self-esteem at that second.
Also, you as you were with like a slight time delay.
Sure. Yeah, from a physics standpoint, sure.
I'm
Sure,
sorry, I
the-
can't
the
turn it
flow of
off.
time.
I can't.
However, you can't view yourself objectively, and so trying to look at your career while seeing like how do I place in this. Don't get me wrong, I get a lot of information by how other people react to me.
Yeah.
I learn things that tell me, some objective information about how about my position in culture. But again, I try not to think about that as any kind of metric for making decisions. And you're right. I got television famous a long time ago, and that, like I said, it gives me some momentum. But I still view that like the most important job, our most important job at being a public persona is honesty about one's own experience. A friend of mine a friend of mine became somewhat famous, and their parent was already famous, and their parents' advice to them was, being famous is it's a ticket to make someone's day with the littlest effort imaginable, just by like being gracious and listening.
Someone has given me so much of their time that it behooves me to give them just a little bit of mine.
Yeah, exactly, totally.
Pay it back. And to kind of circle this all the way back, I mean, that's the feeling I felt after meeting you for the first time, after getting that picture with Jamie Heineman back in 2010 when he visited my school over a decade ago, and getting the picture on stage, walking out, checking the camera turning it on, turning it off, making sure it was still on the camera, telling everybody that I knew. It's been a wild ride, man.
You know,
to bring everything back around, it's surreal.
And the place you're coming from is one of real gratitude, and I really appreciate that, and that resonates to me, because that's absolutely the lesson of the last couple of years to me is in the small moments of grace, of which I get to I have been able to enjoy so many over the course of my life. I'm so grateful for those moments on the deck of my house or in here solving a problem, chatting with you, talking to another colleague on the deepest level about the work that we do and how mystified and satisfied we are at the same time.
You have completely different ideas about the exact same thing.
I think gratitude it's a really good state to spend a lot of time in.
I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for everything that you've given me, knowingly or not, for helping me craft what may be the ultimate piece of Mythbusters fanboy art. I mean,
well, so listen.
Can you think?
Last time I was in LA, I had to cancel coming over for dinner. I won't cancel next time because I want to come see this in situ.
Yes, it will be mounted up, and I can't. Yeah, nerds. I can't think of a better thing than this for a Mythbusters super fan, someone who grew up with it. It's an incredible piece. If you want to see how Adam and I actually built it, go check out the video that is up on Tested right now. I'll put a link in the description if you want to check that out right now. Adam,
dude,
it's been a hell of a lifetime for me. And here's to many more years of doing stuff and not totally always understanding why.
Indeed. Absolutely.
Kyle, I have a coda because I really enjoyed our conversation, but I was clearly dancing around a point that I don't think I fully, properly articulated, and I'd just like to take this opportunity to say this one thing based on the conversation we had, and that is we are makers. We are science communicators. We make videos. We make objects. We make stuff and we put it out in the world. And we are part of a great continuum of other people doing that. And it is reasonable and part of the process to pay attention to what other people are doing that is within the same frame. That's part of being a person. That's part of being obsessed with what you do. Absolutely. But the way of madness lies in hoping that you could control how what you do lands in the culture. See, I think there are a lot of people attempting to do that. I'm going to do this, and then people are going to think this about me. Again, that way lies absolute madness. We make stuff. We make it based on our response to the culture. But as far as how the culture responds to us, that is the thing we have absolutely no control over. And I think that's what Rilke means when he says it's best to be ignorant of your best qualities. It's about just hunkering down and doing the work that you're doing. You can't control how it lands, and it might not. And like people whose work radically intersected with the culture, like Bob Dylan, he hit a perfect moment at a perfect time with the perfect skills in the right culture. But part of that is his incredible genius, but part of it is also the happenstance. And there are probably, for every generation that a Bob Dylan shows up, there are probably thousands and thousands of people equally as talented and driven whose work just doesn't seem to resonate. And that's fine. That's the lottery of being a sentient being. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks for giving me a chance to add this little coda. Peace.